I've talked to you about the recruiting part of it as a New York City kid,
Mhm.
and you end up down in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Clearly, Rick Pitino's been somebody who's had a lot of influence on you. Give us your best recruiting story that maybe we don't know, whether it is Kentucky or, as I used to joke, I really wish you had gone to St. John's
Yeah.
back in the day. But is there a recruiting story from another school that you've never told or your go-to?
Yeah. I mean, I won't mention the school's name or anything like that. I remember I'm on a campus visit with the school, and the head coach puts like $10,000 on the dashboard. And he put that there and he was like, "That's yours." And then I was like, I don't really want that. That's short money. I'm looking for that long-term money. And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be an NBA player." "Well, $10,000 for it." You know what I mean? So I wound up not entertaining that school anymore, not just because of that, but watching some of their habits and different things like that. It just wasn't conducive to what I wanted to participate in that could help me move forward. Go back to the quote, what does it lead to? You know what I mean? And so that was one interesting one. And I also had a lot of coaches when I was going through the recruiting process, because I would lead with, I want to carry a briefcase. And I would have a lot of coaches, Hall of Fame coaches, laugh at me, when they're in person. "What are you doing to do that for?" You know what I mean? And I didn't entertain them even any further because I saw how short-minded their thinking was. You know what I mean? And the one thing I always cautioned my son, and probably why he chose to play for Richard Pitino, was because I knew that, playing for Rick and the relationship that I had with him up to now, that his son would be honest with my son. And that's all you want in recruiting is transparency and honesty. Because as you go through this particular recruiting process, it's not necessarily just about you. It's about the coaches. It's about the university. And it's also about the coach keeping their job as well. So it's the business side of things. And people will say things to you in order to get you on campus so that they can benefit from your services. You know what I mean? And that's not necessarily you benefit from it. So I've always flown under the banner of recruitment. Hey, be honest. You know what I mean? Tell me what your expectation is, and we'll tell you what our expectation. If it meets and we have the same core values, yeah, we'll entertain it. But honesty is far and few between in that business.
Is it true about the Kentucky thing that they gave guys horses back then?
Yeah, I didn't get one. You know what I mean? You know how I know I didn't get one? Because I eventually got into the horse business with Coach Pitino. And then I found out how much a goddamn horse really costs to maintain. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know who got the horse, but I will tell you this. It's probably, he didn't make money on the horse. You know what I mean? So vet bills and feeding bills and boarding and all those things, that stuff is expensive, man. And at one point we had a stable, Old Memorial stable, me and Coach Pitino and my business partner, along with Chris Sullivan, one of the founders of Outback. We probably had 30 horses, man. And I got out of that business, man. That's the what do they call it? The game of kings or something like that. And it's the reality, man. It's expensive, man.
Yeah, it makes boating look like it's a good idea.
The best day of a boater is when you get it and when you sell it.
So let me last recruiting little thing. If it weren't for your mother, would you have gone to St. John's?
Probably not. And the reason why is because when I grew up watching Big East basketball, that was with Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, Pearl Washington at Syracuse. Who else? Chris Mullen, Walter Berry at St. John's, all those guys, Boo Harvey, all those guys. The Big East was trending down when I was coming. It wasn't the same. You know what I mean? It didn't have the same muscle, the same pop. And then also being a local kid and St. John's being a commuter school at that time, I don't know what it is now, but Ryan, I grew up in the projects and I would be going and living in the projects in Queens. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. You know what I mean? So I wanted to see something different. Luke Carnesecca recruited me and he said to me, he's like, "I know I'm not going to be able to get you," because he got wind that my mom wanted me to go out of New York State. But he did recruit, Malik Sealy, who was a St. John's legend and different things like that. Another guy that I played with, David Kane, who was a point guard there. So they got some New York City players, but I was not a fit for that because it looked like it was from a living situation, it was a lateral move, man. I moved into Wildcat Lodge in Lexington, Kentucky, man. It was an upgrade, man. It was an upgrade.
I want to go back to a younger Troy Aikman. Your family moves out to Oklahoma. I was looking up some recruiting stuff this morning, and then you never know really what to believe, but I know there was obviously baseball interest there with the Mets. What's your best recruiting story, whether it's why you ended up at Oklahoma or someplace else you were flirting with maybe going?
I wasn't highly recruited. Jimmy Johnson was at Oklahoma State when I was coming out of high school. Barry Switzer, of course, at Oklahoma. I had also visited the University of Tennessee and Missouri, and those were my trips. And I was 17 years old when I came out of high school, and I just really was not prepared to leave too far from home. Looking back on it, Tennessee probably would have been the best fit. Johnny Majors was the head coach there at the time. It would have been a great atmosphere. I didn't know much about Tennessee football at that point in my life, but would have been amazing. But I had always planned on going to Oklahoma State because they were running the pro-style offense, and Oklahoma was still in the wishbone. And even though they were saying they were going to the eye with Marcus Dupree and they were going to throw the ball, and that's why they were recruiting me. And it's ultimately how they were able to land Keith Jackson, who was the number one tight end in my recruiting class as well. And I took my recruiting trip to Stillwater, and I went to an event. Jimmy pulls me aside, and we talked. And I told him, I said, Coach, I'm coming to Oklahoma State. It's where I've always wanted to come. My whole senior year, I was going to Oklahoma State. I just knew that's where I was going. But I said, I want to take the last recruiting weekend visit to Oklahoma. I hear they put on a big show. They bring all the Heisman Trophy winners in, and it's quite a spectacle. And I want to experience it. I'm only going to get to do this once. He tried to talk me out of it. I went, and I got caught up in it. And the reason I did was because I came from such a small high school. I just wasn't certain that I could play quarterback at that level. I wasn't confident enough to say, yeah, I'm good enough to compete at this level. But what I did think was that I'm good enough to play somewhere, whether that's safety or tight end or line. I'll figure it out, and I'll be a starter somewhere. And I want to win. And at Oklahoma State, you weren't going to win the conference title. You certainly weren't going to win a national championship. And Oklahoma, you had a chance to do all that. And I wanted to win. And so I then went to Oklahoma. But after about a week, I knew I could play quarterback at Division I level. And so, I shortly then transferred a year later and went to UCLA.
It worked out for everybody. I mean, even Jimmy later on, because at least you had that relationship. That's a great story.
He recruited me again to Miami. He recruited me again to Miami when I was leaving Oklahoma. I turned him down twice, because if I had signed with Oklahoma State, I never would have played for Jimmy. Right after National Signing Day, Jimmy became the head coach at the University of Miami. So I don't feel so bad about turning him down because he wouldn't have been there anyway, But I didn't. I was all set for my recruiting trip to Miami, and he says, "Hey, we're looking forward to having you this weekend." I said, "Hey, Coach," I said, I committed to UCLA. I'm canceling all my trips. I'm going to UCLA, and that's what I did. And then when I'm coming out of college, all of a sudden there's these rumors that, hey, some oil guy from Arkansas is going to buy the Cowboys, and he's going to name Jimmy Johnson as the head coach. And I'm like, geez, that third time, here we go, So, and then Switzer ends up being the head coach at Dallas after him. It's just been one big Groundhog's Day for me through most of my athletic career.
Well, it was good that you were good enough that they weren't petty, right? Be like, this guy,
Yeah.
Well,
That's right.
Before we let you go, we like to do this with all of our athlete guests. Let's go back to Ames, Iowa. Your recruiting story is probably a little different because you ended up at Creighton. What's your best recruiting story from that time?
Oh, man. Well, there's a couple because I was never planning on playing for my dad in high school. So he was at Iowa State. He wasn't doing great there. So he kind of saw the writing on the wall that he could potentially be out there. So we kind of just made a decision that, I'm probably not going to play for you at Iowa State. So I was going to look at more mid-major schools that were recruiting me. And Central Florida, UCF was one of them. And I get to the airport in Orlando. My dad gets in the car with their coach. And then I get in the car with Marcus Jordan, MJ's son. He picks me up in this all white Range Rover, Jordan logos on the headrest. I'm just this kid from Iowa, I'm just starstruck. I'm like, this is MJ's son. And we stopped by the dry cleaners, and he brings this whole bin of laundry from college to the dry cleaner. And I'm like, being from Iowa, I'm like, this is usually where you just get like suits and sport coats taken care of. He had his whole laundry bin, taking it into the dry cleaners. And I just thought that was hilarious. And he was an awesome guy. And he took me, we went to some parties and they got me into some clubs. And I just remember the next morning telling my dad, yeah, I want to commit. Like, I really want to come here. And my parents were both like, after every visit, they're like, just give it a couple of days, sleep on it. Let's think about the next visit. We don't want you to get too excited about one place. And of course they were right. I ended up committing to Northern Iowa like a week later after their visit, just because it felt like home. And then the Creighton deal, obviously, I was signed with Northern Iowa, not to go too long here, but I was over at like a high school friend's. It was like senior week. We were like probably playing beer pong or something. And my dad calls me. He's like, hey, I need you to get home. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm a high school kid. I got my curfew. He said, no, get your ass home. I need you home right now. And I get there and my whole family's gathered around the living room. And I'm like, oh, something must be up. And he's like, I've been offered the Creighton job. I just wanted to, run it by you first. Like, would you be interested in joining me? And I was like, well, I guess I don't really have a choice here. So I obviously pretty much committed and signed with him right there. And, the rest is history. I had to call the Northern Iowa coach, who I love still to this day. It was one of the hardest phone calls I had to make, but obviously worked out for all of us.
Could you have told your dad no?
I mean, he just gave me that look, I was probably, this is post beer pong too, I was kind of just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm excited. All my friends were pissed at me because they were all going to Northern Iowa and they wanted to see me more, but Creighton wasn't too far. And we ended up doing okay. So it all worked out.
Yeah, you did more than okay, man. I mean, you lit it up there. I actually have one quick little, did Iowa State, after your dad moved on, did they say, hey, we'll still take you?
No. I mean, it was crazy because Harrison Barnes was my teammate in high school. So we always kind of make that joke. What if we both went to Iowa State? Like maybe my dad would have like a lifetime contract there, but it didn't work out that way. And I think best for all parties, you see Iowa State playing well right now with Coach TJ and my dad kind of reinventing himself at Creighton. So it's been awesome to watch.
Yeah, he's done an incredible job, man. He's been there a long time. Let's go back to a high school age Danny Hurley. We know the history. We know the family's history. You're in this incredible run in high school. And I want, whether it's with PJ getting you to the Hall, your best recruiting story from those days.
I'll give you two for me. I'll give you a quick two because Davidson, I actually visited Davidson. But they scared the heck out of me with the honor code there. Once they explained to me how that worked, I felt like just coming from Jersey City and just my academic background there, that could be a tough one, as much as I loved Matt Doherty, who was an assistant for Bob McKillop back then. But then I visited South Carolina, incredible staff back then, Ryan. That was George Felton was the head coach. You had Jimmy Black. You had Joe Dooley. You had Eddie Payne. It was like a big time staff there. But I my last night at a visit was a Hootie and the Blowfish concert, which caused me to get on that airplane and just incredibly hungover. And I knew that there was no way physically that I could keep up with like a Southern school from a party standpoint.
As a UVM attendee who also visited the South later in life, I watched and I just go, I don't know how anyone did this down there. So we are aligned on that one. Okay, take us back to Springfield, Illinois. Your Chicago Sun-Times Player of the Year. There was a little debate on where you were actually still going to go. Give us your best recruiting story.
Good question. I just remembered this one part of the story. Someone's asked me about private planes because I don't fly private. So catch me at an airport near you. Kansas, they came and picked me up they came to pick me up in Springfield on a private plane, and it had the Jayhawk on it. So as I pull up to the Springfield small regional airport, like it only goes to Chicago, I think. It might go to Chicago 2 or 3 times a day, and it might go to St. Louis. I think it's too short to go to St. Louis. So very small airport, so not many planes in and out of there. And when I pull up to the airport, we go through the gates. And I'm like, why aren't I going through the actual airport? And so I don't understand the private plane setup. And when we get around the airport, you can see planes on the tarmac. I'm like, wait, what is that? I saw the Jayhawk. I'm like, wait, what? And so I had no idea. And to pull up straight directly to the plane, hop on the plane by myself, like I don't even understand the moment. And so I sit down and buckle up and I just don't move. Because like I just don't comprehend that I'm on a private plane to myself. And it was probably my best visit because, you know, I wasn't highly touted. And my recruiting process was like started late. So I didn't get recruited till the summer before my senior year of high school, like that July. Most kids are getting recruited in 9th grade now, 8th grade. And so I was a late bloomer. And so I was low maintenance. And Drew Gooden was my host. And Drew Gooden was my favorite player in college basketball. So just to hang out with Drew Gooden was like the highlight of all my recruiting visits. And we play NFL, we play NCAA college football on PlayStation. I stole some shoes from Nick Collison because we wore the same size. And they had this thing where they had this crazy highlight video on the football field on a Jumbotron. And all these pictures that I took when I first showed up to campus, not knowing why I'm taking all these pictures in jerseys. And they had a highlight reel for me. It was all pitch black. We were walking down this dark alley, and I'm not knowing where we're at. And it's like a tunnel to the football stadium. You come up, and now you're on the field. I thought it was like a mob hit. Like it was so strange. And so the trip was just full of surprises. And Drew Gooden and I are really cool to this day. Like, that's my man. We were never teammates in the league, but every time we see each other, we embrace because he was like, bro, you're one of the coolest recruits I ever had because you were just so cool. I'm like, bro, I was just happy to be hanging out with Drew Gooden. So that was my favorite trip.
Yeah, but then you went to Arizona. So
yeah, but I understood like systems, like, you know, Kansas, you know, was high-low, you know, transition offense, you know, point guards and power forwards or centers were going to the league, you know, besides Paul Pierce. Up until that point, how many, you know, great wings came out of Kansas? And so I'm looking at it from that perspective too. And this is before Bill Self got there. And you kind of saw the same thing at Carolina in terms of Roy Williams and his offenses. You know, it's a lot of high-low point guards, you know, bigs. You know, you never seen too many wings be able to, I shouldn't say flourish, but not be able to show their full skill set, you know, me being the player that I am. So that's why I went on the West Coast.
Well, it all worked out, despite what Dick Vitale said on draft night, which I know you've told that story 1,000 times. We're not.
He apologized.
I know he did.
It was really cool. It was really cool how he did it. This was like 3 years ago apology too. It was pretty funny.
Thanks, Andre.
Yes. Take care. Thank you.